alienated, damaged young man walks through the carnival where he works, followed from behind in a dizzying, long, handheld take. He straps on his helmet, climbs onto his bike, and rides into the globe of death, where three men driven to dangerous acts circle each other over and over again. Derek Cianfrance communicates the whole meaning of The Place Beyond the Pines in the first few moments of the film. This is a story about how our fates are determined by our actions and the actions of those who came before us. How consequences can cage you, and how to escape alienation and corruption. This is communicated through the stories of free men and their experiences with extreme actions, their attempts to understand the consequences of those actions, and the question of whether we can ever be free of the sins of our fathers. Luke, Ryan Gosling's character, is the man in the globe of death. He can't write, he's covered in tattoos, he plays with knives, he's bad news. And Ryan Gosling's typical weird, wounded puppy boy shtick works well here, because at his base, Luke's not clever or good. He's a dumb guy who drives well. In fact, his attempts to be good motivate the movie. After realizing he has a kid, Jason, in a town where his carnival stops over, he attempts to be a good father to make up for the lack of a dad that he had growing up. After a chance meeting with Robin in the woods, he turns to bank robbery for money.
Everybody who wants to live, put your hands in the fucking air!
Underneath his motivation to be good, Luke has another agenda, not the thrill of robbery or resisting order, although that seems like it's involved as well. It's just that bank robbery is a reflection of the way he understands the world. Me show up, me show force, me get money, me be dad. And at some level, Luke's unable to understand the consequences of his actions, or perhaps just his inability to control them. It's a testament to Cianfrance and Gosling that this brute, a cipher of a character really, somehow ends up being an electric performance.
Let me give you a ride.
Here's a scene as an example. Ro and Luke are in bed together talking about the child they have, Jason. Luke talks about giving Jason ice cream, so at least whenever he thinks of ice cream, he'll think of his father. Ro quietly starts to weep, but he doesn't even seem to realise. And as they have their day out together, she keeps crying at certain points. It's clear she understands that this is a sort of fairy tale they're making up together, that Luke will not be in their lives. But he doesn't understand, can't understand. He's simple and he tries to be good, but he fails terribly.
That's a good trick.
I'm going to talk about the other two characters shortly, but I highly recommend that if you haven't seen the film, you go and watch it before we continue. It really is the sort of thing that should be seen without any spoilers.
Good for pursuit.
45 minutes into the film, we meet Avery, a young cop played by Bradley Cooper. He's chasing Luke, and after a confrontation where shots are fired, Luke falls out of a window to his death. As Avery looks down at Luke's body, it becomes clear that the film is going to take a dramatically different turn than expected, as it proceeds to follow Avery and eventually Jason as a young man. Gosling's performance is so believably mythical that his ghost haunts the rest of the film. His influence is felt far beyond the actual screen time of his performance. It soon becomes clear that far from being a film merely about crime and punishment, cops and robbers, this is a movie about how actions have consequences and decisions like Luke's can shape lives for decades. Movies sometimes try to imply that. The Place Beyond the Pines moves you through the ramifications of those decisions over a long timescale. Our second protagonist, Avery, is in some ways a mirror image of Luke. They're around the same age, they both have young sons, they both struggle to define themselves under a burden of masculinity. But Avery is very different. Instead of an absent father, he has an overbearing one. And where Luke is unable to conceive of the consequences of his actions, Avery is almost neurotically obsessed with them. He's drawn into a twisted revenge scheme by fellow cop DeLuca, played with skin-crawling intensity by Ray Liotta, who takes him to Rose's house and searches for the money Luke stole. Avery's complicity in an action he can't resist, despite his clear discomfort, twists him up from the inside. And when fellow officers start asking him to take drugs from the evidence room, it becomes clear that the corruption in the department is spreading inside him.
I just want to give you something. All right? Listen, This is the money that we recovered from your house, okay? I want you to have it.
I don't know what that is.
You don't have to ever even see me again. Just take the money. I'm not here as a police officer. I'm here as a regular guy. Listen.
Get the fuck
Listen
away.
to me. Listen.
You fucked up my son's life. Therefore, you fucked up my life. Get the fuck away from me.
Cianfrance describes Avery as a man who is held up as a hero but feels corrupted inside. And Cooper portrays that conflict perfectly. His rising anxiety replaces Luke's simmering anger, both men locked into a journey they don't understand and can't control. It's important to note that Avery's attempts to control his fear of the consequences of his actions, to fight corruption, to try and choose his own path, aren't actually courageous, but the acts of a cornered man. He ends up submitting to his father, manipulating nepotism and privilege to pick his own position as assistant DA. Here we're shown another approach to consequences, another failure to escape a destiny rigidly determined by individual actions. 15 years later, the story moves to focus on Jason, Luke's son, and his interaction with AJ, Avery's son. AJ is a lump of a kid. Grown in privilege, he's adopted a slurring, faux tough speech pattern and a hard man attitude. Jason is totally different. He's focused, intense, intelligent, and always watching. It's enough to make you feel bad for Emery Cohen, who puts in a great performance as AJ, all swagger 1 minute and then suddenly crying and dropping the dumb accent the moment something bad happens. He's almost too convincing as a complete waste of space, unwatchably so, nearly, especially in comparison to Dane DeHaan's stellar performance as Jason. Jason shares characteristics with Ro, his mother, but also a father he's known nothing about. But he does have a father of sorts in Kofi, one of the few truly honest characters in the film. When pushed by Jason, a man he sees as his son, he tells him Luke's name. This leads to Jason meeting Robin and discovering the truth about his father. As it turns out, AJ is also ignorant of this aspect of his father's past and begins to push Jason after Avery gives him special treatment. This is a story about sons discovering their fathers and becoming consumed by what their actions mean to them now. After a final confrontation in the woods, Jason faces a choice. Will Jason choose to follow his father's path, go down a road of mindless aggression on a meaningless mission of vengeance? Or will he take Avery's choice and do the right thing eventually, but become obsessed with avoiding the consequences of his wrong actions? In the end, Jason's choice is to break the cycle of criminality, revenge, and attempts at forgiveness. He recognizes his past, but uses it to inform a decision to leave and create his own future. It's a disarmingly hopeful, bittersweet ending for a film that at times is incredibly grim. Cianfrance's position seems to be that our lives are determined by the actions of others, but that we retain the right to interpret and reinterpret our lives in light of what we want them to be. The Place Beyond the Pines is full of mirrors, and none of them are more emotionally and technically effective than this shot of Luke being mirrored by this shot of Jason. The high angle, looking down, locked in place behind Luke, that's our point of view, the audience as gods looking in on a universe that's rigidly deterministic, which slides inexorably towards an endpoint. The setting, the dark green of the woods, the road stretching forward, show Luke minimized and alienated by a world he doesn't understand but must inevitably follow the rules of. I don't really believe that there are best shots in films, because a shot without context can't mean anything, but this shot is all context. Here, The Place Beyond the Pines once again encapsulates its meaning in a single sequence.